I brought up the June calendar here, and you can always go back to see what you've missed or watch a replay to the previous or see what's going on in July for next. But I just want to let you know we have several things coming up here, both free resources and CME for those that are acupuncturists and naturopaths and functional medicine doctors, so you can check to see which ones you want to join. I do want to point out that part 2 is on June 4th. So this is part 1 of a 2-part series. So do use that link to sign up to get your Zoom link. And then we'll have those up for the month of June, part 1 and part 2, for you to watch as a replay. And I will share with you that those links will take you to this page. So this is what we're doing here. And you can learn more about what the topics are. This is where the replays will be. So just so you know, if you're looking to watch this again, this is where the 2 replays will end up. And I do want to let you know that Dr. Bill Bengston is offering his 3-day workshop on the Bengston Energy Healing Method. And that's going to happen on June 27th, 28th, and July 11th through Zoom. We're going to do this online. I personally had the opportunity to attend Dr. Bill's workshop, which I thoroughly enjoyed and use in my clinical practice. And I think it's going to be great that he's offering this now without travel, that you have access to the Bengston Energy Healing Method. So again, follow that link from that page, and that will take you to information on the workshop. Team, if you can bring up the disclaimer, please. Great. So just want to let you know that this is for educational purposes only and entertainment. This is not medical advice. This should not be interpreted or perceived as medical advice. This is for educational purposes only. If you have a health condition, a physical health condition, please seek the physical body, please seek out a qualified healthcare provider. Again, this is for educational purposes only. This is not meant to be medical advice. Bill, while I'm doing a little bit of an introduction for you as well, feel free to start to share your PowerPoint so we'll be ready to go. You can read Bill's bio on that landing page. I do want to share that I've had to speak at a conference where Dr. Bengston was speaking, and I thoroughly enjoyed his lectures there. And then, as I said, I've attended his workshop. We've broken bread together, and he's really had me think of things from a different perspective. And always a treat to hear from him, learn from him. He comes from a very, I think, a little bit of a skeptical background. He wanted to kind of show that maybe this stuff was nonsense, and he's done some research. You'll learn about his research, what he did in mice, where mice were injected to develop cancer, and his hands-on healing effect would cure these mice. And he used healers that were skeptics, even non-believers. And so I've invited Bill to come on here and share his research, give us a different perspective, outside the box thinking of how healing may or may not be happening, especially for things that you can't measure with those 5 senses, which he's actually doing his best to measure. And he's coming up with vaccine ideas. This man is doing stuff that is outside the box, pioneering stuff. And I think it's, in this day and age, even dangerous for him to publicly share this stuff. So let's get him while we can. Let's get him while he's still here on this planet.
This is my last talk, right?
Without any further ado, I give you Dr. Bill Bengston.
Thank you, Lauren. And Lauren said he would cut my mic if I didn't put this slide up. So I'll get this slide out of the way. And Lauren, now maybe you'll let me go for a couple more minutes. Welcome, everybody. Obviously, the title is Lessons from the Lab, a selection of energy healing experiments. And as Lauren alluded, I've been doing experiments in the lab for, I don't know, 75 years or so. And it started way back when I ran into a healer that rudely fixed me of having a bad back. And I don't believe this stuff. I'm a skeptic. I remain a skeptic. And I watched clinically hundreds and hundreds of people get fixed. I started to partake in those fixings, and I developed a healing method, which seems to produce some reasonably interesting phenomena. And those people who are going to be taking the workshop will be learning that method. I mean, that's basically the goal of the workshop, is to make it practical and go out and do it. But whenever I give a workshop, or whenever I give trying to teach people a healing method, I always try to ground it in lab work. And so, you know, really, I've been, I don't know, I have at least 18 or 19 different mice experiments. I have cell cultures. I've done the research in 5 different medical schools. So I've been around and doing this stuff. And the lessons from the lab part of this talk is really specifically geared to learning how to heal. And so I'm trying to back up with a selection of research that will kind of, I think, carry over and be the moral to the story, so to speak. And that'll become clear as we go on. One of the things that's wonderful about lab work is that you get to question everything. And I personally get nervous with people who just believe stuff. I like people to be looking for data, looking for evidence and such. And one of the joys I've had is learning that almost all of my beliefs are wrong. And I'm okay with that, because when you have an idea about how the world works, you can walk around just having belief in how the world works, or you can take it into the lab and test it. And I've decided to take the stuff into the lab and test it, and I find out almost everything I thought was real isn't real, and the things I didn't think was real are real, and so I leave pretty confused. And so what I hope between today and the next talk I give on Thursday, you'll be scratching your head a little bit and saying, I didn't know the world worked quite this way. And that would make this a good talk. So I've got up there a selection of energy healing experiments, and energy is in quotes. And just to give you an idea, a long time ago, I thought healing had something to do with energy. And now I'm reasonably confident, probably wrong, but I'm reasonably confident that there is no energy in healing. And this will take up as we go through. So I'm going to question everything and encourage you to do the same. So this is just so Lauren will let me keep talking. And let me put this first into categories. In my 80 years of doing healing research, these have been the major outlined goals. And the first and the most obvious one is, what are the parameters of healing? And by parameters of healing, I mean, what makes it work better? What makes it work worse? What enhances? What detracts? Is there anything we can putz with to see healing variation as an outcome? How do we maximize the outcome? So, for example, let's take obvious physical things. Does distance matter? And the answer is going to be no. Distance doesn't matter. And so it doesn't make any difference whether I do a healing experiment with mice and I do it at 2 inches or I try it at 2,000 kilometers. You get the same result. And so there is no diminishment. Now, let me ask you this. If there is no diminishment with distance, how could this possibly be energy? All energy that you know and all energy that I know, and almost by virtue of the fact of calling it energy, diminishes with a pretty simple formula, diminishes with distance. So if I'm talking to you and I start moving away, it gets softer and softer. If I shine a light, the light gets dimmer and dimmer, and they do it according to the exact same pretty simple formula. But healing doesn't trail off with distance. And so I start with, and maybe I'll come back to this, with a skepticism that there is in fact any energy at all. I think instead that healing is related to information rather than energy. And I can give you a mechanism of action maybe later on today or Thursday. We'll see how we do. So this is what I mean by parameter of healing. If I'm going to do it here, if I'm going to do it at a long distance, does that matter? Let's look at psychological factors. Does it matter whether belief, should the healer or would the healer increase healing efficacy if they believed in healing? Would healing be enhanced if the healee believed? Would the healing be enhanced if you tried? Would the healing be enhanced if you focused your attention? You get the idea. So we can vary all these different things, and we can have as an outcome a variety of measurements of healing efficacy. And just to give you a quick look, since I raised belief, I think all other things being equal, and I'm a statistician, that's a statistical cop-out, as all other things being equal, I suspect that healing is diminished by belief. And if I could have a bunch of believers versus a bunch of neutrals, I think the neutrals would heal better. If I had a believer as a healee, as opposed to a neutral as a healee, I think the neutral as a healee would matter. And so I suspect, all other things being equal, that belief retards. Doesn't have to crash it, but it retards. When people believe things, they have a tendency to want to defend their beliefs. I mean, there's a lot of people who actually believe their beliefs are real. Those of you who hang out with me for a couple of days, your head will explode and you're going to let go of all your beliefs and be free. It's a wonderful thing. Just everybody's wrong. Relax. But people who believe want to reinforce their own belief. And so they get all worked up in this stuff. I think belief does not help healing. What happens to the healer and what happens to the healee? So are there brain correlates? Is there a certain dedicated bundle of neurons? Is there a location over here? So what happens? What happens to the heart? What happens to the head? What happens to, you get the idea. I look into this, and not today, but down the road, we'll look at some physiological correlates of healing. They're reasonably interesting. How can I teach you is an interesting question. How can I get you to be better at healing? What techniques work? What techniques don't work? And so these workshops, for example, are built and evolve, hopefully getting better and better at teaching people how to do this stuff. The scientific motherlode is the development of a theoretical model. And that is something that'll help you understand how all this healing stuff works. And I'm telling you now, because I've only been doing this research for 85 years, I'm telling you now that I don't have a good theory of how healing really works. I can tell you also, I don't know anybody who has a good theory of how healing works. There's a lot of people out there speculating, but speculation is very different from a testable theory. And I don't have a testable theory that really makes good theoretical predictions. And so you can see how little I understand this, and that's why you probably shouldn't be listening to me today, but you can see how little I understand this, because when I go into the lab and I generate a hypothesis, so I'm making a prediction. When I do a test, this is what I'll find. I'm almost always wrong, which is reasonably interesting. And if I'm almost always wrong when I generate a hypothesis, it means I don't know what I'm talking about. And anybody else, the safest thing to do is don't test your ideas. Just walk around blissfully content believing your beliefs. I can't do that. And so I have to go test them. And I find out when I test my beliefs, I don't have a great batting average, which means I really don't understand how the world works. And what I've been working on as a major goal in the last couple of years is the development of practical applications. And this is, if we go to the fourth bullet, the development of a theoretical model, even if I don't understand something, it doesn't mean I can't use it. So for example, if you put 10 theoretical physicists together in a room and you ask them what gravity is, you're going to get a fist fight. But there's no question there's gravity. If you get 10 theoreticians of healing into a room and ask what's healing, you're going to get into a fist fight. But healing happens, and I'm going to show you some evidence. Healing happens. And so I can take gravity and not really understand how it works. If you're a fan of Einstein, you think it's this. If you're a fan of Niels Bohr, you think that. If you're a fan of, you get the idea. But there's competing ideas about how gravity works. But gravity happens. Can we use it? Can we use it to our advantage? Yes. Do you understand how healing happens? Not really. Can you use it? That's what I'm working on. And so you'll see some data later on, not today, into practical applications. Can we make it, in other words, scalable? Could I bottle it? Could I essentially put it into a battery? Think battery. Could I put healing intention into a battery and use the battery to charge, as it were, it's only a metaphor here, to use it in some scalable, practical application? And the answer is, I'm not even going to say reasonably exciting. It's very, very exciting. And just as a quick look ahead, but I can't do it today, I've stored healing and reproduced it like a battery in cotton. I've done it in water. I've done it in cell medium. I've done it in animals themselves. I've done it by recordings. I've done this in a whole variety of ways. I don't think there's much question at this point, at least in my mind, that in fact you can store, capture, and scale healing. And I'm working right now to see how broadly I can scale healing intention. So I've got experiments going on plants, experiments going on in animals, and we have clinical applications also going on in people, letting them get healed through a gizmo. So it's reasonably interesting. We'll get to that down the road. Sometimes, but not often, I write in for the general public. On the left, this isn't a sales technique. On the left, we have a book. It's a Once Upon a Time book. It just kind of tells a story. On the right is much more interesting, frankly. This is a training course. And so this is essentially a workshop that's recorded. It's more than that. It was developed specifically to teach people. And so if anybody is interested in learning how to do this crazy stuff, the thing on the right, which started out as CDs, I don't know if they still exist as CDs, you can get it, It Sounds True. And it's actually a drill and practice in how to do it. I don't have secrets about, I have this secret healing technique and I keep it tight to the vest and I don't want anybody to know. I just let it hang out. And so again, I don't have any proprietary stuff. So this I write for the general the population. Most of the stuff I write, though, I write the kind of stuff that nobody reads. And I probably wouldn't read it either had I not written it. But and so I write for academics. I write in peer-reviewed journals. I write, and all that implies. So the top bullet, for example, effects induced in vivo by exposure to magnetic signals derived from a healing technique. Somebody should put that to music. That was just published about a month ago in a biology journal, and it's reasonably interesting. It will demonstrate, in fact, we can store stuff and we can produce reliable genomic changes in experimental animals with a special kind of recording that we made. So this kind of stuff is where most of my things are. And if you go to my website, I think there are a bunch of academic papers if you're particularly masochistic. I think I have about 35 academic papers in all of this. And so if you're geeky, read this stuff. If you want to read stuff in English, I also sometimes write for a general population. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. This is kind of like setting a broad theme. I started out clinically in healing and ended up in the lab. And so I've had a foot in both doors. My experience, and this goes to the conventional and the unconventional world, my experience is that there are basic science researchers, and that could be in healing, could be in biology, could be in chemistry, could be in physics. There are basic researchers, and they all inbreed. So if you get a bunch of research biologists together and they talk to each other, they all share the same lingo, they share the same culture, they share a lot of the same assumptions of the work in their field, but they all have a tendency only to talk to each other. So you get a bunch of biologists, and biologists tend to talk to other biologists. On the flip side, you also have clinicians. And so let's go biology. So in biology, you got a basic researcher over here and a clinician over here. You have an MD or thereabouts, an MD who actually is trying to do something in the world. The biologist is trying to understand how the world works. The clinician is taking a patient trying to fix them. My experience, and I work with pharmaceutical development companies and I do statistics for FDA things and all that kind of stuff. But my observation is clinicians have a tendency only to talk to other clinicians. MDs like to hang out and talk to other MDs. And again, they share the same language, they share the same culture, they share the same way of looking at the world, they share the same attitude towards clients. and they tend to talk to each other. So MDs or thereabouts are inbred. Biologists or thereabouts are inbred, and they don't talk to each other. So you go to a biologist and say, yeah, great, I got this in a test tube and not in a rat and whatever. Have you ever taken it out into the real world and tried it? And they look at you like, what are you talking about? No, of course not. And you look at clinicians. And so you talk to a bunch, I hang out with a bunch of MDs, and you look at, and they talk to each other and they share case reports and all that. And I ask the same question, it's just the inverse. Have you ever taken your ideas about what you found in the human population, the clinical population, and brought it into the lab for testing? And they go, no, why would I? You know, I'm fixing my patients. And so the practitioners tend to talk to practitioners, and the geeks tend to talk to other geeks. I'm trying to get people to talk across the board. I'm trying to get the geeks to talk to the clinicians. I'm trying to get the clinicians to talk to the geeks. And this is true in the conventional world, see, for example, biology and medicine, as it is for the unconventional world, healing. I bet I'd be willing to bet a nickel, which is my maximum bet, but I would be willing to bet a nickel that a bunch of the folks listening here or who take the workshop and they want to learn how to heal and heal the sick and raise the dead and all that stuff, and they're interested in producing the phenomenon out there in the real world, but they're not going to question their assumptions. They're not going to take their ideas into the lab. And I hang out with a bunch of lab geeks, and they're not interested in taking it out into the real world. I think this is a shame. So nonetheless, that's going to be my bias. The basic researcher, as well as the applied researcher, they talk a slightly different language, and so they have a tendency not to talk to each other. I'm trying to foster some communication. So in this regard, I'm going to suggest to you a promise that I will address 8 propositions. And the 8 propositions can be phrased in the form of a question, or it could be phrased in the form of a statement. It could be applied clinically. It could also be tested empirically in the lab. And so, because of limited time, I'm really only going to address the first proposition today. When we come back in a couple of days, I think Thursday, I'm going to address 2 through 6. And if I have time, I'll get to 7. 7's really good. But I have no chance of getting to 8. I'm going to deal during the workshop, and this isn't a deliberate tease, I'm going to deal with the workshop, in the workshop itself, that's a month down the road, with propositions 7 and 8. And we can play when we try to bring this into the clinical world. But today, I'm going to be nice and humble, and I'm going to address simply the first proposition. Those of you coming back Thursday, I'll address 2 through 6. 6 in particular is really interesting. And I think in 6, I'm going to suggest to you a model even of how placebos work. Testable, a testable model. And I will, for example, in proposition 6, suggest placebos aren't psychological. They're an actual physical resonant bonding. I'll deal with on Thursday proposition 5. Some types of energy healing may not be compatible. So if we're going to look at healing as something to be applied, can you apply anything else? Is healing, does it interact? Can you take it with conventional medicine? Can you take different kinds of healing with different kinds of healing? We'll deal with that, not today. Healing occurs in bursts, I'll deal with on Thursday. There's a dose response to treatment I'll deal with on Thursday. And we'll talk about the difference between remission and cure on Thursday. But today, just nice and simple, let's establish that healing happens. And here, I've got in proposition 1, cancer can be cured. You can substitute whatever you want for cancer. I've done most of my research on cancer for a very simple reason. When I started this about 85 years ago, we went around to various people with various conditions and what happens if I do this? What happens if I do this? What happens if I do this? And what we found was malignancies respond quickly and dramatically. Benign growths, not so much. So if you're going to take something into the lab, you might as well know something you've had at least experience getting rid of. And malignancies we get rid of. It's interesting, but we do. And so don't get hung up on the word cancer here. I'm just relating it to just my research. You could substitute for cancer anything you want. Anxiety, depression, tumors, Parkinson's, arthritis. You get the idea. I'm just focusing on cancer because that's where most of my research has been done. So it's really proposition one that I want to focus on here today. And I want to ask some interesting questions. And I want you to see when we ask the question that I'm addressing proposition one or I'm addressing proposition two. And it is of interest to a geek in the lab. It is of interest to a clinician. And it's also interesting to a patient. So this is related to the propositions. Researcher, clinician, or patient would care about this. If a patient comes in, sits down here, patient comes in, sit down, and they have cancer. And again, I'm just using cancer as an example. They have cancer. The first thing they're going to ask is, can you help me? The first thing the basic researcher is going to want to know is, does it work under controlled conditions? The first thing the clinician's going to want to know is, do I have a shot at helping this patient? So the first question everybody shares, the geek, the patient, the clinician, can you fix, fill in the blank, Parkinson's? Can you fix arthritis? Can you fix, fill in the blank? Second thing the patient will ask, can you fix me? Will it last? If I feel better, am I getting cured? Am I getting a remission? Am I getting a reduction in symptoms? Is it real? Third question the patient will ask, how much treatment is necessary? So again, I come in, you're the therapist, I sit down, I'm in your office. Can you fix me? Am I really going to be fixed, or just is this temporary relief? How many times do I have to be treated? Incidentally, I hate the third bullet point when patients ask that question. You know, they've got some horrible condition. How many treatments do I need? You know, just I don't have the patience. But how many treatments is necessary? If I go now into my lab, I read how much treatment is necessary. I read this as a dose response question. So I'm sitting there in a lab, hanging out with test tubes and all that stuff, and I'm wondering, can I demonstrate healing? Is healing permanent? Is it a cure or is it a remission? And I want to know dose response. If I give a lot of treatments, does that help? If I give longer treatments, does that help? If you're the clinician, how long do you know to treat a patient? You see, it's the same question. So the patient has the same question but a different language than the clinician, who has the same question but a different language than the geek in the lab. And they don't talk to each other. So the clinician goes around and he says, I tried a patient and it took 15 treatments. I tried this patient, it took 8 treatments. I tried this patient, took 2 treatments. Well, that's fine. Did you ever try it under controlled conditions in the lab? Can we look at it? Is there anything along the lines of a linear relationship? How does this thing work? Does more dose mean better this? These are important questions. Fourth thing the patient would want to know, when am I going to feel better? When will the tumor be gone? When will I be able to walk? This has direct application in a lab. It has direct application in clinical practice. It has direct application to the patient. So you're going to heal me using whatever technique. Can I take medicine? Can I take aspirin? Can I take statins? Can I eat this fruit? Does it matter if I eat bananas? Now, there's a lot of people out there in healing land who thinks, oh, healing is special. You know, it's somehow separate from the world. Or I've even heard it, there's an S word it's been associated with, a spiritual, yeah. And so it's even spiritual. So it's not the same as material things. Well, is it possible that healing, like conventional medicine and conventional treatment, has interactive effects? And the answer, folks, is yes. So if you go and you talk to, let's say somebody has seriously screwed up and they're going to a bunch of doctors. So they go to the lung doctor and the lung doctor gives them lung medication. And then they go to the kidney doctor and the kidney doctor gives them kidney medication. And then they go to the heart doctor and the heart doctor gives them heart medication. You get the idea. So they're taking this meds, this meds, this meds. Now ask any doctor, how do these meds interact? And I guarantee you the answer. Nobody knows. It's too complex a problem. Nobody can make a prediction like that. Once you get into a boatload of different kind of treatments, interactive effects are unknown. Could the same thing be going on with unorthodox healing like this? And I'm going to suggest to you, yes. So does this work with that? Let's test it. Let's find out. And this is my seventh proposition, which I'm not going to get to today. And with luck, we may make it on Thursday, but we'll give it a shot. This is seriously interesting. Does a particular state of mind matter? And I'll just give you a poke ahead and just to titillate you a tad. There are some people who are extremely sensitive and they're aware of this and that and they're tuned in and yada, yada, yada. And there are people who are on the flip side or along a continuum, there are people who are bricks. They don't feel anything. They're not aware of anything. They're oblivious to everything. So I've got a continuum of seriously sensitive people and seriously insensitive people. Does it matter in terms of healing? And I'll just give you a one-word answer, no. But I'll show you some detail. This is not speculation on my part. This is, if I'm making a factual claim, I have to have, this is my own criteria, I have to have independent replication of multiple labs. The people who are drawn to healing tend to be sensitive, but it turns out insensitives can heal just as well. And we'll look at some reasonably interesting stuff having to do with that. Can healing be stored and turned into a conventional therapy? I'll give you a one-word answer because it takes a little longer to explain it. The answer is yes. So does a particular state of mind matter? Yeah. I mean, it actually does. But it turns out not what you'd expect. Your attention is not helpful. Your focus is not helpful. Your mindfulness is not helpful. Again, not speculation. You'll see the data as we move along. Can healing be stored? We'll play with that down the road. Probably not today or Thursday because it takes too long, but it's fun. And the answer will be yes. So let me talk about a couple of experiments. And what I have here, if I can find my pointer, which I can't. Oh, wait, I just found it. Okay. So what I have here, selected cancer experiments. Again, I've been doing this for 90 years and I got a boatload. So I'm hand picking this. These are now mammary cancer experiments. I don't know if you can see my pointer. City University of New York, 2 experiments. And that means at the City University of New York in conventional biology labs, we have 2 formal experiments. We have 2 formal experiments. We have 1 formal experiment. We have 3. And I've done most of my work recently in Providence, Rhode Island at Brown University. And so I've got a bunch of mammary cancer experiments at Brown. Just finished one a couple of months ago on sarcomas. I don't know, again, if anybody's seeing my pointer. I have 2 at the University of Connecticut Medical School. I have a test on oncogenic mice at the University of California in San Diego. I didn't bring any racy pictures here today, but I have pictures of nude mice, which we also did at Brown University. Lauren told me that the audience here would be too horrified if they actually saw nude mice. So all the mice I show you will be fully dressed, and you don't have to worry about that. Lauren is kind of that way. I've done tests on extremely aggressive cancers. I've got a whole lot of in vitro studies on cancer cells, and the list would keep going on and on and on. You get the idea, though. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm testing, retesting, multiple lab testing, and so if I give you a factual statement, you'll always know whether I'm speculating, whether I have data, where I have the data, how it was done, is it published, is it peer reviewed, yada yada. So there's a lot of stuff to draw on, and I've selected just from a small segment of this for the purposes of today and Thursday. And I selected the research for the purpose of those people who want to transition to clinical application. So let's go look at the propositions again and phrase them in terms of a question and then see how much evidence there is. I said I would only deal today with the first proposition because of lack of time. So if you remember the first proposition, and again, I don't know if you can see this. Cancer can be cured using energy healing. I've got energy healing in quotes because I don't think there's energy, but cancer can be cured. I can put that in terms of a question. Can cancer be cured? And obviously my answer is going to be, yep. Now down here on the last 2 lines, I've got what I'm drawing upon. And I'm drawing upon experimental evidence. And by experimental evidence, as you just got an inclination, I have a lot of experiments on mice. I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of mice that have been tested with cancer. I also have clinical experience. So here I'm saying one is evidence because it's done under a controlled setting, and one is experience because it's not done under a controlled setting. If you have someone who comes in and they have cancer, and because we're just focusing on cancer today, if they come in and they have cancer and we do healing, 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 and they leave without cancer, I'm oversimplifying, and they leave without cancer, that's an experience. It's not evidence. It's an anecdote. Someone else comes in, they have whatever they have, you do healing, 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 and they don't have it anymore. That's a clinical experience. If I do it in the lab under controlled conditions, which I can't really do on humans, but if I do it in the lab under controlled conditions, that would be considered controlled evidence. So down at the bottom here, I have evidence that cancer can be cured, and I also have clinical experience. The evidence comes from, as you just saw, many, many experiments, as well as that include hundreds of mice. I also have clinical experience. I don't have any idea how many hundreds. I'm going to go more than 500 people. So it's not a casual, you want to hear a weird story. This is an ongoing, and the ongoing clinical cases are also being put together by folks who I've taught how to do this. And we'll get into maybe even who those folks are down the road. So here's the question. Can you fix cancer? The proposition is yup. And now I'm going to show you the difference between speculation and evidence. So the only thing that matters here, well, let me just say it in English. Forget the gobbledygook. This is biological gobbledygook. If you take away the gobbledygook, here's the question. In the lab, as opposed to in the real world, in the lab, we take mice where we inject them with cancer. Not always, there's different kinds of mice, but for this purpose right now, we inject them with cancer, and we know exactly what's going to happen after they've been injected with cancer. So we know how long they'll live. We know when they're going to start dying. We know what's going to happen. And there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of studies on whatever we're playing with. The mammary cancer I'm about to show you is the most studied cancer model ever. There are, this is literal, over 2,000 published studies in conventional journals studying this model. So the general idea here in English, take away the gobbledygook, is you take specially bred mice and specially developed cancer, and you put the cancer into the mouse, and then you see what happens. In this particular mouse, what happens is survival looks like a perfect normal curve. So for those who are more statistical, it looks like a perfect normal curve. The standard deviation of death in this is actually 3 days, and that will get your attention if you're numerically inclined, which means 2/3 of the mice die within 6 days, plus or minus 3 days. We know how many die after 10 days, 11 days, 12 days, 13 days, and we know, and it'll map out to a beautiful normal curve. Everybody knows the outcome of this. Everybody knows what happens when you inject this cancer. No mouse has ever lived more than a month. It's actually 27 days. But no, rounding, no mouse has ever lived more than a month. And this is in 2,000 experiments. So what I do when I go into the lab, because I think in very simple terms, what I do is I go into the lab and I say, give me something that everybody knows about. And then I inject a single variable, healing. So in this particular mouse model, all the mice die, looks like a normal curve. If you heat them, if you freeze them, if you give them chemotherapy, if you give radiation, if you do this, if you do that, no mouse has ever lived past a month. And I go, beautiful. That's the kind of thing I like to play with. And then I interject something new, healing. So let me show you this particular mouse model. It's pretty ugly. And that'll be the mouse. And what you can see, if I have a pointer, I don't know if that's working in there, but you have a pointer. This is the tumor. This is a particularly ugly looking mouse. You don't need to be a biologist here. You can see the fur is falling out. If you could see the eyes, nobody's home. This mouse is, for all practical purposes, dead. It's down to 3 legs. 1 leg has been eaten by the tumor. It's not a good mouse. It's not a good way to die. So these mice die, it's ugly research. These mice die either from having the internal organs crushed and or dying of malnutrition, and it's usually both. So it's ugly. Thousands of people do this. It's the most common model that there is, and rodents all over the place, they're saying, come on, enough already, make this stop. And so in response to rodent prayers, here's what we do. We go into I'm only going to use pictures of myself because I don't want to out any of my volunteers. So this is me at Brown University, dressed funny. And so you're garbing up, you're in a sterile environment. You can see that I've got my hands over a cage of, I don't know how well you can see them, and we've got other experiments going on at the same time. And so we got a bunch of different things going on. But basically what you're looking at is me dressed funny, doing the technique I'm going to teach in the workshop. You can't see the technique, it's a mental technique. If you do this, we know what happens otherwise to the mice. They die and it's ugly. If you do this, then I'm going to show you what happens when you do the healing technique. Now, I have a side point I need to make. I'm going to show you what happens, and let me tell you that I didn't expect what happened to happen. And that's because I don't understand healing. But I also expected, and this is going back a little over 90 years, I also expected when we started this, that if we got to the mice early enough, and we put our hands around the cages, exhibit A, if we put our hands around the cages, so that, let's say the mice were just injected a couple of days earlier, we put our hands around the cages, we go zzz, zzz. I'm being stupid here. But we put our hands around the cages and we apply the healing, and however we do the healing, if we got to it early enough that we could stop the mice from ever developing cancer. And when I first did this, again, first experiment was roughly 95 years ago. And when I first did the experiment, then the tumor started to grow. And I said, well, if the tumors are growing, this isn't working. And I wanted to call this thing off. I'm an empiricist, and tumors are growing. I didn't want them to grow, so I'm assuming it's a failure. Now, this is going to matter. I wanted to call it off and say, we don't need to have the mice suffer. Let's just put them out of their misery and move on. And we said we were going to try this. Didn't work. And I had a friend of mine who is heartless. He actually had a role model in The Wizard of Oz. He played the Tin Man. So a friend of mine who is heartless said, do it a couple more days. And I said, what's the point? It doesn't work. I mean, I don't believe this crap. It doesn't work. He said, do it a couple more days. So what happened in a couple of days is the tumors got even bigger. So now I'm jumping up and down going, it doesn't work, folks. Pay attention. A couple more days. Gets an ulceration. I'm going to show you the ulceration in a second. You get a blackened area on the tip of the tumor, and then it opens up. And I'm freaking out. I don't believe this crap. And the tumors are growing. The tumors are splitting open. All sorts of, and my heartless friend is going, a couple more days. And the mice went to full cure. And the tumor, not what I wanted, that's the point. Healing is not what you want. This is the point. I'm going to beat this into the system, no matter how many times you come and listen to me. Healing is not your glorious mind over matter. It's not some psychokinetic effect. It's nothing like you imposing your magnificence on nature. Healing happens the way nature lets the healing happen. So I didn't want the tumors to grow. I didn't want the blackened area. I didn't want the ulceration. I don't want any of this crap. It's never not happened. Now that's interesting. So why do they always grow tumors? So let me show you. Down here is an editorial on the part of the mouse. It does in fact happen. And you can see a tumor starting to open up. Now look at that. Does that look like a healthy mouse? I mean, if you saw this for the first time, you can imagine, as I did, we don't want to keep doing this. We gotta, let's call the thing off. Now I can tell you, I don't have the pictures for this actual mouse here, but I can tell you this mouse went to full cure and was cured for its entire lifespan. And this is the way that this particular form of cancer goes away. I wouldn't want it this way. Again, I'm not imposing my magnificent will on nature. Nature is screwing with my head, showing me surprises. Now notice it's 35 days down here. 35 days, that's 35 days after injection. The world record before me was 27 days. We didn't make it statistically past how long they should live. These are cured for full lifespan. So they live 2 years. And I'll emphasize this on Thursday, not only do they live their full lifespan, they're immune to further injections of the cancer. Reasonably interesting. So, if you look at the coat here, this is very different from the last mouse I showed you. This is a good coat. This mouse is healthy, it's just ugly. And we've never had an experiment with a mammary cancer where the mammary cancer didn't grow. Now, let me go ahead and I say, this is a finding in the lab. Think of the clinical implications. So for all of you folks out there who are card-carrying healers, and you get a patient, and the patient comes in, can you fix me, blah, 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 and asks all the questions. But the person comes in and says, okay, let's do this, and you start treating using my method or your method or whatever method. I don't care what the method is. You start using whatever healing technique you use, and the tumors grow. Now, if you're the patient and you came to be fixed and the tumors grow, why in heaven's name would you stay around? And the answer is most people won't. Now, what happens if the tumor starts to ulcerate? Now, I got news for you folks. I've treated a bunch of people where not this, but the analog to this happens. And it's looking ugly. And the counts are going in the wrong direction. And the tumor's getting bigger and bigger. Now, our bias is tumors are bad. My bias, when I did the first experiment 100 years ago, my bias was tumors are bad. My bias with people is tumors are bad. My bias is tumors are bad. Now, I was at a near you at the University of Washington, just outside of Seattle. I was giving a lecture, and the person I was lecturing with was a alternative cancer researcher from MIT. And we're going along, and I'm bitching about how come the tumors always grow and this and that. And no matter how early we get to the mice after injection, the tumors always grow. And she looks at me like I'm an idiot. And she goes, well, of course they grow. And I go, why? What do you mean, of course they grow? And she goes, because tumors are therapeutic. And I said, what? And she said, tumors are therapeutic. Tumors are the body's defense against cancer. If you take the tumor out prematurely, you've destroyed the ability of the body to fight the cancer. And I went, what? What are you saying? She says, you got to have tumors. You got to have the markers. You got to have this stuff. And so is she right? I don't know. But you see how very different it is? So my bias, again, 105 years ago, my bias that we don't want this, and I want to call off the experiment because it's not working. Now take this into the clinical, person's coming in here, treat me. Well, my symptoms are getting worse. My pain's getting worse. My tumor's getting bigger. The damn thing is ulcerating. You know, what do I do now? And the answer is going to be, I don't know. Are tumors healthy? I don't know. I mean, that certainly would be heresy in oncology because we declare war on tumors. We declare war on cancer. We like to declare war. I don't know if you Canadians do the same thing, but we like to invade places. So we like to invade, and we invade tumors, we invade places, we invade, and we declare war, and that's the way I was. All the mice get tumors, no matter how early you get to the mice. This is reasonably interesting. Not all people get this effect, and this is dramatic. I'm cherry picking this, to make a point. Not all people get the tumors and the ulceration and all that stuff, but some do. And so the people who have come and been treated by my method, and they get cured, they're either the bravest people or the dumbest people I've ever met. And that sounds facetious, but I don't mean it. Could you, if you got the same crap as you're looking at on the screen, if that happened to you, would you say, oh boy, this is working? And what I'm telling you now is that healing is not for the faint of heart. Healing is not nice and smooth and everything is wonderful and bells play in the background and the harps play and the birds chirp. Healing's ugly, and it's not going to go the way that you predicted. And that's been my experience. So different kind of cancer. I don't think I have too much more. Different kind of cancer. This is just a different kind of cancer. And I'm showing you these because it's easy to show you these. Obviously different color mouse, but this is also non-metastatic. It just grows and grows and grows, and the mice die the same way that the mammary cancer does, except this is a sarcoma. But same plot, it's cancer. And so you can see it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And if we do our hocus pocus stuff, one of the reasons I'm picking this particular series of experiments is because it gets better in a different way. So in this particular form of cancer, which is sarcoma, sometimes this is not the same mouse, but you're getting a tumor, you're getting a good sized tumor, and then you come back in the lab a couple of days later, and the tumor's just disappeared. Didn't ulcerate, just disappeared. And the biggest question we have that we're working on now, I got a big grant to study this, why does a mouse draw or grow a blue arrow on its back? I mean, we have no idea where the arrow comes from. And if we can solve that, I think we can solve just about anything. But this particular form of cancer just kind of, it's almost like you pop the balloon or you let the air out of the balloon and it just disappears. It goes to nothing. But sometimes you get a similar kind of ulceration. Now, why some mice get the blue arrow and some mice get the ulceration, I got nothing. I got nothing. They are all cured, but they get cured in different ways. And then once they're cured, there's no sign that the thing ever had cancer. So it's not a remission, which I'll deal with a little bit more on Thursday. It's a cure. I used to say the mice remitted, and then some biologist started yelling at me, go, it's not a remission. You're not remitting anything. They're cured. Okay, sorry. You're not supposed to use the word cure in cancer research. People get upset. So different kinds of cancers, and as you saw earlier, I got a boatload of different kinds of cancers, oncogenic mice. Lauren won't let me show the nude mice, on and on and on. You get the idea. They're all following something, but they follow their own path. They do it their own way. And the same will be true if you decide to go out into the world clinically and decide, I'm going to go fix people with cancer. It's not simple. It's not for the faint of heart. And you're going to have it's not a nice little linear decline in condition. It could be ugly and have ugly stages. The end result is the same. Why you go this way and why you go that way, that's what I'm researching. Now, we can also do this on people. Again, we have hundreds and hundreds of cases of people. And I show this only for a very quick illustration. February 10, March 21st. It's not this year. But you can look at stuff here on the left. And if you take a MRI, you're going to see things you don't want to see. And on the right, you're going to see things you do want to see. And it's not magical. It's a process. So if you follow and you have the capability of multiple MRIs, of multiple blood tests, of multiple thermal imaging, you get the idea. But if you follow it, you're going to see a pattern, but it's bumpy. So sometimes 1 week to the next, it could look worse, and then it gets better, and then the thing ulcerates, and then it like that. And so you go bumping along. So you can do this by MRIs, you can do this by thermal imaging, you can do this in a whole variety of different ways until you follow it. These images are a week apart. You're looking at things by thermal imaging that you don't want to see, more likely you want to see, more likely, and then finally, that's what you want to see. But it's going to take, this is 3 weeks or 3 weeks in duration. So, can you do cancer? Yes. We haven't dealt with, can you do MS? Didn't deal with that. But certainly regarding Proposition 1, and again, I've only shown you a small amount gleaned from 105 years of doing the experiments. I think after a while, there's sufficient experimental evidence and there's sufficient clinical experience to make, it's not a question anymore. So in other words, if you say, and people do this, you want to come to my lab and do some cancer? No, it's not interesting anymore. You want to come and try something you haven't tried, I'm there. But you want to show me that cancer can be cured, I'm not interested. And if you go out and do my technique and you come back all a tingle, which you will the first time, flopping on the floor, going, they don't have cancer anymore. And I'll go, yeah, okay. But what did we learn? Before they had cancer, now they don't. Enough already. So there's enough bodies There's enough mice bodies, there's enough human bodies that this is no longer interesting. What is interesting, if we cut down to the bottom here, second order questions, which is what I'm going to focus on Thursday, meaning not can you fix this, but rather how many treatments do you need? Does this matter? Does that matter? What's happening? What are the genomic changes? What's the and all those kinds of things. But that we now at this point, I simply assume that cancer is going to go away because it's no longer in it. And I'm a card-carrying skeptic. But at this point, it's not interesting anymore. After 500 people and 500 mice in a half dozen medical schools, plus a bunch of other extra labs, it's just not interesting. But notice the second bullet. This does not mean that healing fixes cancer. Notice the difference. I'm suggesting cycling. Somehow, that's the mental technique we're going to learn in the workshop. The mental gimmick that we do produces changes in what happens to people, mice, cell cultures, whatever. I'm not a comparative healing scholar by any means. I'm not even exactly sure how to spell Reiki. I don't study it. I don't practice it. I don't know the stuff. I'm not a healer. I'm a geek in the lab now, but I've done a few hundred people. And I know my own stuff. So I am myopic. If you were going to be a good clinician, as opposed to me, and I'm not a good clinician, if you were going to be a good clinician, you would pay attention to your client. What condition do they have? And what would be the best method of attacking that condition? And what that really means is you would then be assuming that not all healing techniques produce the same outcome. And there's almost no comparative healing studies. And this is exactly what's missing. Not because people are getting all worked up over the stupidest things like, you think healing is real? I mean, it's not interesting. What works? What works on what? My stuff so far doesn't work on a whole bunch of stuff. And so, for example, I have a standard. It sounds like a joke, but it's not really a joke. It's real. If you use my method, and this is actually the case, if you use my method and you try to treat a wart, you'll find the wart does not respond. If you treat a cancerous tumor, you're likely to find the cancerous tumor responds. Now, other people, different schools of thought, again, not my turf, but different schools of thought, they'll tell you the opposite. They'll say, well, give me a break. Any idiot can do a wart. And I'll say, not all idiots can do it. This idiot can't. And the people who have learned my technique, here it comes, folks, lose the ability to do warts. So let's say you're out there being a card-carrying healer and your specialty is warts. So you've got a little sign out there that says, warts are us. And then you learn my cycling technique. You're going to put yourself out of business. Now, if we don't look at hierarchically, so I'm not looking at cancer as more or less interesting than a wart. I'm saying some techniques do this, but they don't do that. Some techniques do that, but they don't do this. And the people that I've trained in my healing technique and the ones who are good clinicians will go out into the world, and in some cases they'll tell me, I don't know what this means, they'll say, Reiki is better on that than your stuff. Your stuff is better on this than Reiki, depending on what the need is. And we can talk, but not in this talk or Thursday's talk, but when we do the clinical stuff in the workshop, I can talk about the experiences people have had. But what is really, really, really missing is these comparative healing techniques. In many people's minds, you're stuck in the first stupid question, does healing happen? Yes. Can you fix cancer? Yes. Does that mean everybody can fix cancer? No. Any more than everybody can fix a wart. So it's interesting. Get past the thing, can you fix cancer? The question that's interesting is what are the secondary, second order questions? And that's what we'll focus in on Thursday. So somebody, I think, committed a number of copyright violations when they did this, but it is kind of fun. So thank you. Questions? Lauren, you're on.
Thank you, Dr. Bill Bengston. So for those that want to comment and have questions, please raise your hand and we will moderate your hand. I want to remind you about the second lecture. So again, if you go to Healthy Seminars, to the resource page, that will take you to this page where the calendar is. There's the June 4th. So you can sign up for that now. It'll take you here and you can sign up for part 2 of this talk. The part 1 recording will be here shortly on this page. And then there's where you sign up for part 2. And then if you want to know about his workshop that he's doing over 3 days online, June 27th, 28th, and then we'll have a little bit of a break in between so we can practice this and we come together again on July 11th for those 3 days. You can find all the details here on the website. And again, there's an early bird pricing for that as well. So just wanted to make you aware of that, and we'll put that in the chat room. Bill, while we're checking,
did you dump my screen? Did you dump my screen? Because that's what I was trying to do.
Yeah, we dumped you.
Okay, good.
So